What's up, everybody? James back again, working on the deck lid. Thought I'd take a break for a little bit just to talk about what I'm doing, stuff I'm using, how I use it, and why I use it the way I do. I did some body work yesterday on the seams where I welded the edges, got those blocked out. This morning I came back in and did some glaze work on it just to fine tune it, get it where it needs to be. Feeling really good, looking really good. Very happy with it. It'll be in primer here within an hour or two and ready to go back on the car to move on to the next project. But I want to take a minute and talk about what I got going on. I like to guide coat everything, from primer to body filler to anything that I can guide coat to give you that extra assistance to know you've got something feathered out, you got something flat, you don't have any low spots. It's definitely a great assistance for you. It's a tool in your back pocket to help you get the best quality result that you can get. So as you can see, I guide coat everything. I guide coated this deck lid, hard blocked it with 80 grit, Indasa 80 grit, and I come back into it and I glazed all my spots, guide coated the whole entire deck lid again. But once I step up, which I have stepped up to 180 grit, Indasa 180 grit, what that guide coat is doing is it's showing you exactly where your 80 grit sand scratches are. You want to make sure you use that tool to get those sand scratches out so you're not running into a headache in the long run. Some people like to use aerosol guide coat. Some people like to use powdered guide coat. To be honest with you, I like to use both. And here's the reason why. If you primer this deck lid and you go to use a powdered guide coat, a lot of times it doesn't stick to the surface like an aerosol does because the surface has not been broken open. So initially, before I even cut the primer, I like to use a aerosol guide coat. The one downfall is it can clog up your sandpaper, can ball up your sandpaper. That's just the nature of the beast. But when you're cutting with 80 grit, 120 grit, it's not that big of a deal. But I always like to use the aerosol guide coat on a fresh primer job. Once I've blocked it with whatever grit I'm blocking it with, like for this project here, I blocked it with 80 grit. Blocked it down with 80 grit with the aerosol guide coat. Now I come back in with the dry guide coat and I put it on rather heavy. I go every direction I can go to get that guide coat worked down into those sand scratches. That way I know when I'm blocking this, I get those sand scratches out. If you just kind of put it on light, go one direction, and you're running into a problem. You're fighting the fight. And by going every direction, putting it on heavy like this, getting it down into the sand scratches, you're winning the battle at that point because you're getting those sand scratches out. So always use guide coat. It's a great tool. It helps you every step of the way. I highly recommend it. So what I've done is I've glazed everything that I needed to glaze. I've got it all blocked out. Everything's looking good, feeling good. Everything's blending in the way it should. Started on this spot here, got that blocked out. Now I'm working down into the corner across the front lip. And with 120 grit, it won't take long at all to flatten that out, feather that out, get that where it needs to be. I always use my RZ mask when I'm blocking blocking body filler, when I'm blocking primer. That's my go-to mask. My glaze, I kind of bounce around like I do my body filler, depending on what I want to do. I'm using Dolphin Glaze by U-Pole right now. Usually my go-to is USC Pro Glaze. It's a little bit thinner than some of the other glazes. It's a little bit thinner than the Dolphin Glaze. It's definitely thinner than icing. It helps fill the pinholes. It helps level it out a little bit better, in my opinion. It's easier to spread, easier to work with, easier to feather edge. So that's kind of my go-to. Today I'm working with the Dolphin Glaze. It's very similar, just a hair thicker in my opinion, but it still works the way it should. Still works really, really nice. One thing I do want to note is, I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. I'm not here to push these products to make you think that I'm sponsored by these products. I just want to show you what I use, what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I'm just here to hopefully help somebody out that's either wanting to get into this industry, that's in this industry, that struggle with different products, because I know there's 50 different body fillers and glazes on the market. Some work good, some work so-so, some work better than others. Everybody's got their preference on brand. I'm not a stickler for one brand and one brand only. There's only something better. There's only something that works a little bit different for your style or the way you do things, and I don't tend to stick with one brand, one specific thing all the time. Depending on what I'm doing, I'll jump around and I'll use different things. But right now, like I said, I'm using the U-Pole Dolphin Glaze, working really well. My go-to sandpaper is the Indasa. My dry guide coat is the Indasa. Everybody's got a aerosol guide coat. They all work the same. Now keep in mind, you don't want to use a aerosol base coat or trim black or things like that as a guide coat, because they take longer to cure out or dry. So you got to wait longer. And two, they will ball up your sandpaper. And that's one thing you don't want to run into. You want something like the intended guide coat. This one here is from Transtar. Dry super fast, easy to block, and it works really well. But stay away from the base coats or trim blacks or things like that, because you'll fight it, you'll run into problems, and it'll take longer than what you want it to do. So that's just a little advice from me, in my opinion. Some people use it, it works for them. That's all well and good, but it doesn't work for me. That's just my suggestion. But once I get this blocked out, I'll get this blocked out, feathered out, get all my sand scratches out of here. Everything will be uniform. Like I said, I'm switching over from, that's 80 grit, switching over to 120 grit. Working on my sand scratches, working on my glaze, getting this thing buttoned up, getting it dialed in. I had a little dent here that I needed to fix. This thing's been moved around a little bit and had a little mishap, so I had a little bit of a dent there. No big deal. Filled it yesterday, final glazed it this morning, and like I mentioned in a previous video, I had to weld this bottom edge to close my gaps. That's where I came in with my body filler to get it dialed in, and now I'm coming back in with the glaze to get that final tweak, get that smooth, uniform look all the way across that bottom edge. Same way with the glaze in the back. Everything's ready to go. Should have this thing in primer here within the next hour or two, and it'll be ready to bolt back onto the car. Once I get that done, I will show you the results of the body fitment when I was talking about pinching the skin, as well as welding my edges to close my gaps. I'll show you that result. I think you'll be rather pleased with it, because I know I am. You know, with the caliber of this car, what this car is, I want everything to be right on the money. It's going to be a show car. It's not going to be a trailer queen. I'm going to drive this car as much as I possibly can. If it does end up at shows across the country, at some point it might get trailered. But, you know, within several states around me, this car will be driven, and I will enjoy this car. And that's the reason I'm building this car, is to enjoy it, show off what I can do, show off this car for what it is, and put this thing on the road. So, but if you got any questions about products that I'm using, how they work, why I use what I use, suggestions of any products, I'm open to. Other than that, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell your friends, stay tuned.